They tried to erase him in silence. The prison that tried to erase a legend. They told the world he was just another prisoner, that his time in Robben Island would break him, silence him, erase him. But what Nelson Mandela endured behind those iron gates was far more insidious than punishment. It was psychological warfare, designed not to punish the body, but to dissolve the soul. What truly happened inside that island fortress? Why did certain prisoners behave too perfectly? And how did Mandela transform isolation into strategy and silence into a weapon? This isn't just a story about prison. This is a story about the mind of a man who faced betrayal, control, and despair, and yet walked out stronger. Today, you'll hear the hidden chapter that history books only hint at. And by the end, you'll ask yourself, could I have survived 27 years, surrounded by eyes pretending to be friends? Arrival, the island that breathed silence. The moment Mandela stepped off the boat onto Robben Island, the atmosphere felt different. It wasn't just the cold wind or the sound of iron gates clanking shut. It was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that watches you, follows you, swallows your voice. The guards didn't scream. They didn't threaten. They observed. Everything felt orchestrated. The stairs, the timing, even the footsteps seemed rehearsed. Mandela understood immediately. This wasn't a prison. It was a machine of psychological war. His cell was smaller than a closet. A bucket, a mat, no mirror, no books, no calendar. And yet, the most suffocating part was the absence of noise. The silence wasn't natural. It was constructed. Prisoners were forbidden to speak. Guards walked in calculated silence. Mandela often sat against the wall just to hear his own breath. That breath was proof that he still existed. But soon, he began to sense something deeper. There were prisoners who asked too many questions about his past, his routines, his emotions. At first, Mandela thought it was curiosity. But then he noticed they never shared anything personal. They never showed pain. And every time someone was punished, those men were always missing. Robben Island wasn't just a place to forget men. It was a place where men were used to watch, report, and manipulate. The island breathed silence. But in that silence, Mandela began to listen. And what he heard, between glances, between locked doors, was the beginning of something terrifying. Spies among us. It started with a smile. One of the prisoners, older, calm, always polite, asked Mandela a strange question. What would you do if they offered you freedom tomorrow? Mandela paused. The question was innocent. But something about the timing, the context, felt rehearsed. Days later, he received a warning from another inmate. He's not here for the same reasons we are. That man was reporting directly to prison intelligence. Mandela had suspected infiltration, but the truth went deeper than expected. At least 3 prisoners in his section were working as informants, offering personal details, planting stories, and provoking reactions designed to be used against him later. Even small arguments were scripted. One prisoner started a dispute during labor hours, just loud enough for a guard to hear, just aggressive enough to trigger discipline. Mandela said nothing, but he knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a trap. He began testing them. He'd share false information, drop details with deliberate errors, and wait to see which ones returned to him distorted. The results confirmed his fear. There was a system operating inside the cells. And it wasn't just for surveillance. It was psychological warfare. Divide, distract, destroy trust. But Mandela didn't collapse. Instead, he built a new layer of awareness. Every word became measured. Every conversation, a performance. He trained his mind to observe even the smallest shifts, body language, eye movements, inconsistencies in tone. He became a reader of people. And while they watched him, he was watching them. You, watching this right now, have you ever felt like you were being studied, even when no one said a word? Have you ever looked around and wondered, who's real and who's here to watch you? The silent response. Mandela knew he couldn't fight this battle with fists or fury. So he turned to strategy. Silence became his shield. But not just any silence, a calculated, deliberate stillness. He spoke less. He listened more. His face became unreadable. His words, when spoken, were ambiguous but weighted. He began developing a personal language, filled with metaphors, coded observations, and carefully timed remarks that only trusted comrades could understand. He established rhythms. They met by accident, at the water pump, near the quarry, or during rest hours. Words were passed through posture, through fixed patterns. A tap on a bucket meant, pause the topic. A shoe turned sideways at the doorway meant, eyes are listening. What began as paranoia evolved into structure. He wasn't just protecting himself. He was training a culture of vigilance. In this environment, Mandela discovered something profound. Discipline could be louder than shouting. His quiet routine, rising before dawn, keeping his cell clean, exercising, meditating, reflecting, sent a message. I am still in control. The guards noticed. The informants felt it. The other prisoners followed it. Without raising his voice, Mandela was creating a movement. And behind closed doors, intelligence officers began reporting a disturbing trend. Subject 46664 is influencing others without speaking. The system was failing not because Mandela was resisting. It was failing because he was transforming. From inmate into symbol. From prisoner into compass. Pause for a moment and reflect. What is your silence saying? Do you control it, or does it control you? One morning, something unexpected happened. A young prison guard, new, anxious, still unsure of his power, handed Mandela a letter. Not through the official route. Not censored. Just slipped into his hand with a nod. It was from Winnie, the first uncensored message in months. In it, she wrote, "They think they've buried you. But out here, your voice is rising." Mandela folded the letter carefully, without showing emotion. He knew this wasn't an accident. It was a fracture, a crack in the wall. And over time, more followed. Guards who once barked orders now hesitated. Some began lowering their voices in Mandela's presence. Others watched him with quiet awe, unsure whether they were looking at a man or something larger. One guard confessed privately, "You make me question why I'm here." Another was caught reading one of Mandela's old letters, copying phrases into a notebook. Mandela never showed triumph. But inside, he understood, resistance wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was contagious. And he was no longer just resisting the regime. He was transforming its agents. He often said, "You can't hate a man you've truly listened to." And that's what he became, someone worth listening to. Even for those trained to ignore him. If you're still here, listening, ask yourself, who do you become in the eyes of your enemies? Do they fear your strength or your steadiness? The secret revealed. Years later, after Mandela was released, he was given access to certain files, sealed documents, notes from intelligence officers, internal reports. And what he found wasn't surprising, but it was sobering. The surveillance ran deeper than he'd imagined. Letters were rewritten. Guards were rotated based on psychological strategies. Even his moments of solitude had been choreographed. There were entire protocols written just for him. Engagement procedure, subject 46664. But here was the truth. None of it worked. Inside those documents, there were marginal notes. Observations like, subject shows no signs of deterioration, or influence among inmates increasing despite restrictions. And one sentence stood out. Mandela is more dangerous silent than any man speaking. That was the secret. Not the programs, not the files. The secret of Robben Island was that it created the very thing it feared. They tried to erase him, but in doing so, they exposed themselves. The silence they engineered became the canvas for his greatest expression. The prison they built to break him became the ground where his legacy grew. And so, we leave you with this question. If you were placed in a system designed to erase you, what would remain of you when the walls fell? Would it be bitterness? Would it be fear? Or would it be legacy? Now it's your turn to speak. Tell us in the comments. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Subscribe to keep following the hidden life of Mandela. And don't miss the next episode. The presidency, the man who had to choose between nation and family. Click the next video. The story is just getting deeper.